What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is the 2022 Jeep Wagoneer. So about the Wagoneer, this and the Grand Wagoneer are the new top trims here in the Jeep range, and it's the biggest thing that they sell, and it's a very impressive looking vehicle, especially in person, and especially in this velvet red color that looks really nice. Now, as far as the Wagoneers, both the Grand Wagoneer and the Wagoneer here come in the same size. They're all the same length, so it's not like the competitors where you have, a long wheelbase and a short wheelbase version. This kind of splits the difference between the two. So it's about 4 inches longer than what you'd see with like a Tahoe or an Expedition, but then it's about 11 inches shorter than what you get with like a long wheelbase, Suburban or something like that. So it's kind of in the middle here, and as of right now, there is no long wheelbase version. Maybe Jeep will come out with that down the road. But I think this is kind of a cool play to have something that's kind of in the middle between the two. So the Grand Wagoneer is just basically more luxurious and more powerful, and so that's what separates them. There is no size difference between the two. As far as the looks up front there, it's very bold here. You have the Wagoneer badging that's spelled out proudly on the hood. You have the signature Jeep grille there, and I really like the satin chrome accents you have in the lower part of the front bumper there for the tow hooks. A little bit of a skid plate kind of design there in the bottom part, and it looks really good. Also on the sides here, you have these 22-inch wheels with more of that satin chrome appearance with the little black pockets within them. Look really sharp too, and nicely fill out the wheel wells here. You also have another very large Wagoneer badge along with the American flag here on the doors. And you also will see, kind of the side profile is kind of interesting with the way you have that rear window there in the back. Has a very interesting shape to it. Kind of allows this to stand out a little bit from some of the others out there with the very boxy B-pillar and C-pillar treatments you have. Then going out to the back there, it's also a little more unique with you have a square rear window. That's kind of a cool little touch that stands out. And again, the very large Wagoneer script there on the back, which is even raised lettering. They're really large, like almost old school block lettering there on the back, which is a cool touch. And just some nice taillights there out back. And yeah, I think from every angle, this thing really makes a good statement, and it's a very strong look. It's a very attractive look. And if you do want something with even more bling though, the Grand Wagoneer will certainly make it look even a little more high-end with, more chrome in the front bumper and things like that. All right, so let's start up and go for a drive. The Wagoneer here actually has a unique key here. The Wagoneer badging on it, and different than any other FCA or Stellantis key that I've come in contact with. Just some nice buttons there on the back, and a pretty thin key. Has a nice weight to it though, and some nice metal trim there on it. And so overall, just a really nice key. But it is of course keyless access, keyless entry, push button start, all that stuff. So you just leave the key in your pocket at the engine start button, and it starts right up. Also, if you're curious to hear about the interior in the Wagoneer, my wife and I actually just did a full in-depth interior review on this vehicle, so I'll link that above. You can go watch that if you want to hear all our thoughts on this interior. But overall, I mean, it's very spacious, very luxurious here, even without the Grand Wagoneer version. Even the Wagoneer here in this Series 3 is very luxurious feeling, and it's just a really nice interior. But definitely check out that video for all the details. All right, so setting off here in the 2022 Wagoneer. So the first thing that I think I noticed about this vehicle is just how high up you're sitting in it. I mean, it really is a very large SUV, so you'll tower over even normal sized, SUVs, and even some of the bigger 3-row ones. This will be a lot bigger than that because, again, this is on a truck kind of platform. It's a real SUV, and you feel like you're, driving a truck in that regard. But it's a very smooth ride, so it certainly doesn't feel like a truck in that regard. This one does have the optional air suspension, which smooths things out even more, in addition to giving you more customization and adjustability for the ride height and all that. But it's a very smooth ride, but that is just an option here that you can get on these. But I'm sure that all Wagoneers are set up to be very comfortable and very relaxed, to be a great family cruiser. Visibility is also really good, so that makes it nice and easy to drive, since you're sitting up so high. Great view forward, great view out of the sides too. The A-pillar doesn't seem too thick so far, so very easy to see around that. View out of the back is great too. They do of course have a backup camera as standard, but this one doesn't have the 360 camera option, but that is something you can add on to Wagoneers, and that's standard on Grand Wagoneers, and so that'll give you a much better view if you are someone who wants a little bit of extra help maneuvering this enormous beast in tight spaces. But other things that I'm really appreciating immediately about the Wagoneer is the brake and throttle response. So the brakes really, I mean, you just start barely touching the brake pedal and it starts to give you some nice bites. So it's very immediate and reacts very quickly, and so that's very reassuring from a driver's standpoint to have it right there. You don't have to be pushing your foot down a bunch in order to get it to actually slow down. Throttle response is also immediate. So, you know, you have a naturally aspirated V8 engine, so it's just nice, meaty power immediately. You don't have to wait for any turbos or anything like that. And so it's paired up with this 8-speed automatic transmission as well, which is really good at keeping you in the right gear most of the time so far, in my experience. But we'll go ahead and put it up into the sport mode. Yes, a Wagoneer does have a sport mode, surprisingly, but I'm not complaining. So anyway, let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it accelerates. Here we go. Pretty immediate. Wow, yeah, it's pretty good amount of power. It actually also lowered the air suspension to the aerodynamic mode to also help with this sportier vibe. But yeah, so I mean, it's solid power for, you know, a vehicle that's as enormous as this thing is. The Wagoneers run the 5.7 liter Hemi V8 engine with the e-torque system, and so that whole setup gives you 392 horsepower and 404 pound-feet of torque, and those are healthy numbers, but this thing is just so heavy that it does take a little bit of a while to go up to speed. So 0 to 60 times for these, I believe Motor Trend got like a 7.6 seconds 0 to 60. So that's average for normal crossovers. But whenever you look at stuff like the Tahoes and the Expeditions, which have a little bit more punch, you know, those will be a little bit quicker. And if you do want more power, you can go up to the Grand Wagoneer. That gives you the 6.4 liter V8. And with that engine, you'll drop the 0 to 60 time by about 2 seconds, thanks to about 70 more horsepower and about 50 more pound-feet of torque. So if you want more power and you have the money, get the Grand Wagoneer. But, you know, I mean, it's still fine. I mean, this thing still actually, by the way, tows 10,000 pounds with the max tow package. So, you know, plenty of grunt. That is actually best-in-class towing. And, you know, I mean, no one's using these things as drag racers. So I think that a 7.5 seconds 0 to 60 is totally sufficient. You know, I haven't had any issues with power or anything. It's also pretty nice and quiet in here. So this road usually generates a good amount of road noise. And, you know, it's a very dull hum with the road noise here in this. So that's really great. But anyway, we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how this behemoth handles. So this thing is not a lightweight, that is for sure. But, you know, it actually has fairly flat handling for something that's set up to clearly be luxurious and comfortable and does not have a care in the world about sportiness. It actually still does a pretty good job. I mean, steering's a little bit on the slower side, so you really gotta, you know, crank the wheel a little bit more to get it to turn. And you feel that it is a weighty big thing, but it's well controlled, so it doesn't feel like it's, even whenever I push it a little bit more, it doesn't feel like it's you know, coming undone or anything. It has a lot of poise and kind of gracefully goes through the corners there. But these are, like I said, pretty heavy. The Wagoneers, if you go for a rear-wheel drive base model, they'll be just under 6,000 pounds. But this Series 3 with the air suspension and the four-wheel drive system and all that, this one's probably closer to 6,400 pounds. And it does kind of have a tendency to understeer a tiny bit whenever, you know, you are getting up closer to the limits of the vehicle. But you know, I'm not going to review this like a sports car. It handles totally fine, and no one's going to have a complaint as far as, you know, stuff in this segment goes. Having that air suspension does help give you a little bit better handling too, since it will lower itself down a little bit more if you do really care about that. But as far as the four-wheel drive systems, that is one thing. Now, like I said, the Wagoneers come standard with rear-wheel drive. You can get four-wheel drive as an option, of course, and four-wheel drive is standard on the Grand Wagoneer. But here on the Series 3, there's actually 3 different four-wheel drive systems on Wagoneers. But for the Series 3, the main system that you can get as standard is the Quadra Track 2, and that system gives you a low ratio, so you still have the low, you know, crawling gear, and it's a 264:1 ratio there for that. And so that one will be able to send 100% of the torque to either the front or the back. So it's still a very advanced system that detects slip very early and stuff. But whenever you go up to what this one has is the Quadra Drive system. That system is another extra option on this, and this has that, and so that will give you an ability to put 100% of the torque to any wheel to give you the maximum amount of grip. And in addition to that, it also has an electronic limited slip differential. Still the same crawling gear of the 264:1, so it still has all that same functionality. Then you still have all the different drive modes and all that kind of stuff too. And so basically, as long as you're getting a four-wheel drive system, I mean, it's a Jeep, it's going to have, very good capability, in snow and all that kind of stuff, which is what most people that are buying these are worried about. Very few people will be taking these off-road, but it's nice to have the low range and stuff if you do need that. Another thing though, coming back to the ride, I am still really impressed with just how smooth it is for a body-on-frame vehicle. Usually body-on-frame vehicles, can be a little bit on the rougher side, a little bit more jittery. There's some other companies that will have things to kind of combat that a little bit, like Cadillac does with the Escalade and magnetic ride control and things like that. But with this, it has some components from a Ram 1500, but it also has, like I said, the air suspension, but it does have an independent rear suspension as well, which is something you don't get in the Ram. So, although it shares a little bit with the Ram, this isn't just like a Ram chassis or anything. There's a lot that's a lot different. And so, I mean, that's why this is going to have a smoother ride than even the Ram by a good margin. And so if you're someone who, wants the good amount of towing and stuff, you don't need a pickup truck, I think something like this would be a really nice fit and give you an even more luxurious ride. And now we're out on the highway here in the Wagoneer. And I mean, this is what this thing was made to do, is just cruise on the highway. And it does a really good job at that. Again, nice and quiet and smooth in here. You also have the adaptive cruise control system that this one has. And it's a little bit more of a simpler system. So it's not like some of the other systems these days that tries to help steer for you or anything. It does have lane departure warning and all those types of safety features, in addition to like blind spot monitoring, and this one even has the wide angle mirror in addition to the blind spot monitoring, so that's really helpful for trailering and stuff. So that's all great that it has that. But so it's not trying to do any steering, you're just driving yourself. They did say that there will be a actual hands-free driver assistance system that's going to be coming out here sometime for late availability this model year, they're saying. And so whenever that arrives, that should compete with Ford's Blue Cruise system that they're starting to roll out, and what Cadillac and stuff has already rolled out with its Super Cruise system, which will now be trickling down to some of the Chevy and GMC models as well. So, we'll have to see how this system will compare whenever, Jeep comes out with it. But in the meantime, I have no problem steering myself, and, especially here in the Wagoneer, it's just such a comfortable cruiser, and so I don't think anyone's going to complain about doing a long road trip in this thing. So yeah, so far, first impressions here in the Wagoneer are very positive. But thanks to Jeep, I'm going to have the Wagoneer here for an entire week. So I'm going to drive around all over the place. Then I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world fuel economy, as well as my thoughts on the pricing and the competitors here to the Wagoneer. Alright, so I've been driving the Wagoneer here for about a week now, and I've really enjoyed my time in the Wagoneer here. So it was pretty illuminating, though. There were a few little things that I uncovered that I wasn't crazy about here with it. So the first thing is that as I've been driving it more, the brake and throttle are both a little touchy, and it's a little trickier to be smooth with this vehicle. The brake pedal actually kind of reminds me of the brake pedal in some of the Toyota trucks, where it's like weirdly boosted. This kind of has the same thing, where it's a little too grabby at low speeds sometimes, and I had to focus more on driving smoothly so I wasn't coming to more abrupt stops and stuff. So one little thing there. Now, one thing I can praise about the low speed drivability here of the Wagoneer is the e-torque system, which you only get on the Wagoneer. The Grand Wagoneer does not get it. On the Wagoneer here, it's really great. I think the e-torque system is probably one of the best stop-start systems that I've ever used. It's just so smooth, it's very subtle, it doesn't jerk the whole car whenever it kicks on the engine, and it doesn't seem to turn off at the wrong times. It annoyed me a lot less than most other start-stop systems. But thankfully, there is still a button to turn it off if you don't want it, so it's great that they give you that option. But I think it's actually one of the better stop-start systems, and so I've really enjoyed the e-torque system. But another little drivability thing is, once you are up to speed, there were a few times where I wish the 8-speed auto was a little quicker to downshift. There were a few times where it just ended up being in the wrong gear. Part of that might be because, even though this is a V8, it's not a ton of power for just how much weight we're hauling around here. So I feel like that could be potentially fixed with the Grand Wagoneer, but also the competitors do have 10-speed automatics versus the 8-speed this has. So there's a few more gaps where I think, with a 10-speed with the other competitors, they might have a little bit of a better fill-in where the engine's never really feeling like it needs a downshift as much, versus this where, you can still kind of catch it in the wrong gear sometimes, hit the gas, and then it'll roar and, and take off. And so, you kind of have a little bit of that Jekyll and Hyde thing with this engine and this transmission combo, but it's something you can get used to very easily. It's not a big deal. The last two little minor things, nitpicky things, but the first is that this car doesn't have proximity sensors on the rear doors. $86,000 for this thing, and I still had to go and grab the door handle in the front before I was able to put my baby into her car seat in the back seat. So it's kind of annoying because anything basically over 50 grand in the luxury segment seems to have proximity sensors on the rear doors, so you don't have to, do this juggling of door handles in order to get the back doors, unlocked from your proximity key. Not sure why. That seems like a silly cost-cutting thing to be doing on something that's this expensive. So, and also along with that, the running boards, another minor thing, but they are strangely low, and I wish they kind of actually met you halfway. Instead, they give you like an extra inch off of the ground for a little bit of a step, but it's not much help. You still kind of have a tall climb up into this vehicle, even with the air suspension and all that. So it would be nice if they had the running boards that actually came up maybe another inch or so higher. But again, a very minor nitpick. But the last two things here to mention about the Wagoneer are the fuel economy and the pricing of it. So as far as fuel economy goes, these are rated at 15 mpg in the city, 20 on the highway, and 17 combined whenever you have it with four-wheel drive. You get slightly better fuel economy at the rear-wheel drive. So 15 is the city, that's the lowest, that ideally you should be seeing. And in my 88 miles of driving here, I've managed to get 13.6 mpg. So I didn't do a whole lot of highway driving, just a little bit, to test the adaptive cruise system and stuff, and that's it. But still, I'm even under the city rating, and all I was doing was basically relaxed suburban, backwards driving at 35 miles an hour. So not any kind of grueling stop starting or anything like that. And still, I'm over 1 mpg under the city rating. Now, usually in my testing, I do get between 1 and 2 mpg under the city rating. So this falls in that average for my experience with press vehicles. But just know that, you see, 15, maybe that's not so bad in your mind. But realistically, I'm seeing, something here in the 13s. And of course, your mileage will vary, but just, that's what I got here in my week. And then the last thing to mention is the pricing here of the Wagoneer. Now, I don't have an exact window sticker for this vehicle, so I can't give you the exact dollar amount, but going on the configurator and building this with all the options that I know it has, this one is just over $86,000. And so $86,000 is a little bit on the high side whenever you compare this to the competitors. You're basically paying a premium for the Wagoneer. Now, this is 4 inches longer than a Tahoe or an Expedition and things like that. So you do get a little bit more space. So there is some warrant to that, extra price premium there. And I will say that this interior feels a little bit nicer in some areas than some of the competitors, but a lot of the competitors do have pretty comparable trims in their top, the top Tahoe, the top Expedition does give you digital gauges like this does. They do give you large touchscreens. In the Chevy, it's a 10-inch screen too. The Fords now are like 12 or even 15 inches for the screen, depending on what trim you get on those. So that even has a bigger screen. So, I don't really feel like this wins out in the tech space, maybe, for the stereo possibly, but aside from that, it is pretty nice and plush with the triple pane moonroof, and there are a lot of nice features about this. And I think that maybe it looks a tiny bit more upscale than a loaded Tahoe or Expedition would, but still, the price difference, whenever you're looking at a base model, it's about a $9,000 upcharge over a base Tahoe or a base Expedition. And then even whenever you go up to these higher trims like this one, you can basically get a comparable Tahoe for about $80,000. You can get a comparable Expedition for about $80,000 as well. And both of those are also more powerful, it's worth noting. So in the Tahoe, whenever you're going for that top trim, you get the bigger V8 with 420 horsepower. And in the Expedition, you don't have the V8, you have to deliver the twin turbo V6, but that has like almost 80 more pound-feet of torque than this does. Now this is still a towing champ, but just from a seat of your pants power perspective, you might feel a little more punch in those competitors over what you get here in this. Obviously, the power thing can be fixed by going up to the Grand Wagoneer, but that's not really saying much because, then it just basically puts it on par with what an Escalade or a Navigator gives you power-wise. So, this is, the slowest of those three, and you're paying extra still for, that. And so, it's just, you're going to have to really like the Jeep thing, basically, because I think as far as pricing goes, this isn't the best value in the segment, unless, that extra 4 inches of length versus the competitors is really going to make it or break it for you. But I would argue you can go for a Suburban that's comparably equipped, or you go for an Expedition Max that's comparably equipped. Probably will still come in at least at the same price, if not even slightly lower still. So, you know, but I think it just really comes down to, you know, do you want the newest, freshest thing? The Expeditions and the Tahoes have been around for a while. You know, this is the new, exciting thing that stands out, and if you're looking for something different than those two, I think this is going to be a really great choice. But, you know, there are a couple other little things. Like, for example, the Expedition with its platinum trim will give you, like, massage seats, which this does not have. And also a Tahoe and an Expedition at $80,000 give you a 360 cam, you know, backup camera and stuff as standard. This vehicle does not have that 360 camera. That's an extra couple $1,000s, which would further inflate the difference between these vehicles from a pricing standpoint. So I don't think the Wagoneer is the best value. I think it's the worst value of the three, but, you know, you get the Hemi V8, you get the Jeep looks, and it just really comes down to personal preference as far as what you like. I mean, everything in this segment is very expensive, so the difference between $80,000 and $86,000 isn't really much of a big deal whenever you're talking about stuff that's this expensive. But just worth noting, you know, if you are really penny pitching at this price point, this is going to be the most expensive of the three. But, you know, even despite that, I think that this, like I said, it feels a little more premium in some ways than the Tahoe and the Expedition do. Just, yeah, it's been a really nice thing to live with here. But if you are interested to hear what a Grand Wagoneer is like, I'm going to be driving that here just this very next week. I'll be talking about whether that's going to be worth paying the extra for over a Wagoneer and how it compares to its competitors. So definitely stay tuned and subscribe for that video if you're curious. But that's all of my thoughts here on the Wagoneer. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thanks to Jeep for providing me here with this vehicle. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.